Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 19th of July, 2024, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me by video link today, we have Ben Rubin and Debi Evans. Welcome to the programme, both. Now, I've just noticed we have a slight technical problem here, so just give me 1 second to fix it. There we go. So let's bring this on screen then. Brexit without the exit. This is the Blenheim Palace event yesterday, where all the European leaders came over, plus Zelensky, to meet with the new Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer. And this is under the auspices of the European political community. Now, we'll talk about that in a little second, but just let's have a look at some clips of Keir Starmer here. First of all, on the topic of Ukraine.
We've had a very successful and productive summit, I'm pleased to report, bringing together 46 European leaders, including President Zelensky, who addressed the plenary this morning, as I think you know. We discussed once again our commitment to stand with Ukraine, a very important commitment made again today, including supporting their energy needs ahead of winter, so getting ahead of this winter.
Now, he didn't explain why they needed to support Ukraine's energy needs, but we were talking about this a few days ago. Let's bring this back on screen. This is AFP tweeting out that Zelensky has said that solar panels need to be installed in Ukraine's hospitals and schools following a wave of Russian strikes in power plants. And they quote him saying, solar panels, smart meters and energy storage units must appear in every school and hospital as soon as possible. And basically, the Russians have been targeting Ukrainian infrastructure, energy infrastructure, to the point that they are getting very close to not having sufficient for their winter needs if they aren't already at that stage. So it's interesting that Starmer decided to acknowledge that during his opening remarks, and clearly continuing with the sort of Ukraine support narrative. He went on to say this.
Now, we need to be clear. Ukraine is fighting not just for the Ukrainian people, though of course it is, but for the European people, for freedom, democracy and the rule of law. And our security therefore starts in Ukraine.
So this shouldn't be surprising. Our security starts in Ukraine. And of course, he's banging the same old drum about the rule of law and so on, while he continues to ignore the rule of law in so many aspects of life. He went on to talk about the connections with Europe, or our relationship with Europe, and congratulated Ursula von der Leyen.
It's not just a good idea to work with our partners. It's essential. And I said on the steps of Downing Street that I would govern for the whole country, including those who didn't vote for us. And I meant it. We can only make progress on the issues that so many people care about, like illegal migration and national security, if we have the maturity and leadership to reach out a hand to our European friends. And I want to congratulate Ursula von der Leyen for her re-election today as President of the European Commission.
So Ursula in place now. So we now have a war leader in the European Commission, and we have our war leader in the UK. Remains to be seen who the war leader is going to be in the United States, but I think we probably know who that's going to be. But the thing is here, what is this European political community, and what has this got to do with Brexit? He's saying that he's governing for everyone in the UK, but he's clearly not governing for people who wanted Brexit. That was the decision of the UK, because we are in the process of reversing Brexit. So let's just look at the House of Commons library here. This is what they said from October 2022. What is the European political community? And well, here are the key points. The original proposal came from Emmanuel Macron. There was a parallel proposal from others within the European community itself, but Emmanuel Macron's idea was moved ahead with. It was agreed to by Liz Truss. And so this policy of bringing the UK into this new grouping called the European Political Community began with the Tories. It's being continued with Labour. And so nothing changes here for the Prime Minister who claimed that his election was all about change. And so this is all about strengthening the links between EU member states and non-EU member states who share the same European values. This is about bringing the UK back into the European Union in so many practical ways, while claiming to respect the wishes of the people who voted for Brexit. So by not bringing us back into some new treaty, but by just bringing us into this little organization, which will basically make a bunch of agreements over the next number of years, we will end up in the major infrastructure of Europe again. Well, we'll see what it is that they're talking about in a second. But I just thought we should play this clip just to remind ourselves what this is all about.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
Right, so it's not really a joke, but I thought that we should lighten the mood slightly there. But my question here is, and some people will object to this question perhaps, but my question here is that just at the time that Keir Starmer is bringing us back into the European Union, where's Nigel Farage? And of course, he isn't in the country. Now, this is typical of Nigel Farage and his history, and we can talk about that a little bit more in extra. He has not, he's got to a point and then he's decided job done, don't need to do anymore. Really, this is one of the key meetings right at the very beginning of the Starmer regime, and he's nowhere to be seen because he's in the United States supporting Trump. Now, let's listen to another comment from Starmer and see where this is taking us.
So we are going to deepen our cooperation on defence and security.
Defence and security. So European Defence Union is a topic that the UK column has been talking about for many, many years. And it is absolutely key to understanding what is going on at the moment. So let's look at the King's speech just very briefly. King Charles saying a couple of days ago, "My government will seek to reset the relationship with European partners. We'll seek a new security pact to strengthen cooperation and mutual threats faced by the United Kingdom and the European Union." And why is this happening? Well, of course, it's happening because of the threat, as they perceive it, of Donald Trump. Donald Trump looking increasingly like he is going to become the next president of the United States. And of course, the European Union using that as an excuse to say, well, Donald Trump doesn't really like NATO, and therefore we've got to build our own defence capability. But many people in the UK will say, well, EU defence, so what? Well, here's the point. This is effectively the end of national sovereignty. So the European Union in so many ways represents the end of national sovereignty. We've got banking union, we've got currency union, we've got all these various unions within the EU for people who are member states. And this is just another one. But think about this, command and control of national militaries at a European Commission level. This is what they're aiming for. So national militaries no longer in the command and control of national governments, but that moves up a level to the European Commission. Defence procurement also at the European Commission level. And if anybody's in any doubt about where this is going and what the direction of travel here is, just ask yourself the question, why does the UK not have an independent military capability? You know, the defence chiefs and various other commentators at the moment, and the UK column for that matter, talking about the fact that the UK military can't put an army on the field, doesn't have a navy anymore, barely has an air force. Why does it not have this independent military capability? And the reason is because from a policy perspective, it's not needed. We will be in the European Defence Union, and a part of the European Defence Union, you've got to look at the European Defence Union plus NATO as a whole to see what the overall military capability is. Now, going back to 2019, we already had instances of UK military, this man on the left here, UK military personnel wearing EU badges on their arms. This has already happened to many, in many cases. We have had a very close relationship between the EU, the European Commission, and NATO. This is Stoltenberg and Federica Mogherini. And okay, I chose a particular frame from the video, which made it look perhaps a bit more salacious than it is. But I wanted to just give you an impression of why this is, how close this relationship is. And if we look at the map, as far as the European Union is concerned, of their neighbours. They have two key areas that they're interested in: the eastern neighbourhood, which is to the right, which includes Ukraine, and the southern neighbourhood to the south, which includes North Africa. Now, if we look at the eastern neighbourhood first, one of the key aspects of this is so-called military mobility. And this is the ability to move military and personnel and material from the west coast of the European continent, and from the UK for that matter, to the east, to the eastern neighbourhood, which is the next battlefront. This is the map that they produced for it. And if we just look at the text from 2019, 22 member states that you can see on screen, and you'll notice the UK not listed in that. They set this up in 2019, a new programme that implements a major part of the action plan in military mobility, allowing free cross-border surface and air movement of personnel and equipment. The UK joined this about 2 years later, and so we are part of this process. And then if we look at the southern neighbourhood, North Africa in particular, well, we see in orange there the northern African countries like Algeria and Libya and so on. But actually, this is the area that they're particularly interested in. And so just to reinforce this, I'm going to play a little bit of video again. You've seen it before, but I think it's important that we keep reminding ourselves of this. This is Ursula von der Leyen and Tony Blair from different aspects of the Munich Security Conference in 2018, I believe, talking about European Defence Union.
First of all, our collective defence, we are ironclad committed to NATO. NATO of 29, that is collective defence Article 5. But there are problems and issues where I do not see NATO, but Europe has to be able to act.
That though this transatlantic alliance with America is extremely important and we need to maintain it, the best partnership is a partnership where we have our own capabilities that are also strong.
I was talking about Africa. This is not a typical place for NATO. We are very committed to NATO in other places, but Africa is a place where we need to be able to act as Europeans.
For example, one of the things that my institute does is work in Africa, and at the moment we're particularly focused on the Sahel group of countries. That's that band of countries across the north part of sub-Saharan Africa, where you've got exploding populations, dire poverty, radicalization and extremism. We may well face the next wave of migration and extremism from those countries. It makes perfect sense for Europe to have the military capability to help those countries with their security.
And for that, we created the European Defence Union, right, to have a comprehensive approach with diplomacy, economic development, and the military means.
And so this is absolutely the direction of travel at the moment. Now, just to finish this off very quickly, one final comment from Starmer from yesterday.
And on illegal migration, where we are resetting our approach, and that's been central today. As Director of Public Prosecutions, I saw the work that can be done across borders to bring terrorists to justice and break up their networks.
And as the focus continuing to be on illegal migration, which, as we talked about on Wednesday's programme, is a very small part of the problem. This is diversionary. Ignore the major part of the immigration issue and focus on the illegal immigration. And then he talks about the DPP. And I just want to put this up from Squawk Box. Starmer didn't know Re sub-postmasters, wasn't involved on Savile. What did he do as DPP? I think these are very good questions, and questions we can continue to need to ask and have answered. So that's it on that. Debbie, let me welcome you to the programme. And you've got a little bit more on the King's speech.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Well, I've decided to change the language because looking at the King's speech, and we look at sustainability, don't we? Sustainable goals. Well, I've decided to completely change that to unsustainable goals. So let's look a little bit at the King's speech. So what does it mean? It actually means that the King delivers a speech that is written by government. However, I've got a book and it's called In Charles's Own Words. And he says, I'm planning to find out all I can about British life, including the government, civil service, the unions, and everything. So clearly, our King is very interested in our government. but not everybody's a fan. And during the King's speech, there were a number of arrests, there were protests, a down with the crown, not my king. So once again, I have to ask, are Labour's policies sustainable? So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is water, because I do like to focus on water, and we will. So there are plans to put water companies into special measures, new legislation next week. But what I want you to remember is that when it comes to water companies, they are not statutory consultees for planning, and this is going to become evident in a minute. So we already know that water companies' infrastructure is hanging. It cannot cope with any more developments. And actually here you can see the question asked by Lawrence Robinson, who said, can they become statutory consultees? And basically, Christopher Pincher MP said, no, not unless special circumstances, which is why I ask about building and what Labour are planning on building. So they're saying they're going to build 1.5 million homes in the next 5 years. Well, is that sustainable, really, when we've got a hanging water infrastructure that's already over capacity? I don't think so. So what does that actually mean? What are they going to do? Well, apparently they're going to unleash mayors. If we just jump onto the next slide, we're going to unleash mayors. We're going to have next generation new towns. Now, I found out these are called garden towns, everybody. So if you've got one in your locality that's being built, that's what that means. They're planning passport sort of free passes to get for urban developments on brownfields. And they want to give first dibs to first-time buyers. But going back to the immigration and the migration problem, we also see that Labour are going to be allowing 100,000 migrants to apply for asylum. And as of April 2024, 102,888 were waiting a decision. But they were talking about a border security bill, which kind of piqued my interest. So I went to have a look at Civil Service World, and they have confirmed that Labour has upped the funding for HMRC to a border security command. So what is a border security command? Because by my reckoning, if we're going to be having all of these migrants coming in, they're going to be taking up a lot of the homes that Labour intend to build over the next 5 years. But it seems that the Border Security Command is going to, the funding is going to go up from 555 million to 855 million. We're going to get 5,000 compliance officers. We're going to get cross-border police officers. I'm not quite sure where all these people are coming from. We've got a 1,000-strong body who are going to fast-track removal of failed asylum seekers to safe countries, but I'm not quite sure where those are. And my question is, will any of the successful asylum seekers be patrolling our borders in future? That's a question I have for everybody. But let's get back to energy. And we've mentioned Great British Energy before, and this is the Labour big plan, owned by the British, built by the British, the benefits the British. So you think, fantastic, but actually this looks like an enabling scam to me for climate change. But how fortunate that King Charles himself is diverting the Crown Estate for the public good. How does he do that? How does the Crown Estate work? Well, here's a little diagram of how the Crown Estate actually works. Now, the Treasury, they calculate the sovereign grant, which stands at the moment of 86.3 million. They give that to the Crown Estate. The Crown Estate makes the profits and gives it back to the Treasury. So King Charles is very high up on the agenda with wind. How convenient. But also, thanks to Labour and thanks to King Charles, Labour have lifted the 9-year ban on onshore wind farms. So you're going to expect to see wind farms pretty much everywhere. But it doesn't stop there, because as we've already reported and Charles has reported, we're looking at super giant solar farms. And I know that we're going to be reporting on those in the future. But it doesn't just stop with solar farms and wind farms. We've got pylons coming. And for those of you in the east of England, from Norwich through to Tilbury, you're going to get 112 miles of pylons. Now, they're thinking of designing them to look like reindeer, so they're not so nasty to look at. So that'll be interesting to see. And Rachel Reeves has said that apparently all of these pylons, if we want to get, is the only way to get Putin's boot off our neck because we need to invest in homegrown renewables. But my question is sustainable now unsustainable? And I believe it is.
Debbie, thank you very much for that. Now, Ben, let's come on to you. And, well, we're going to talk about the Fabian Society.
Indeed we are, and hello everybody. Big question for me is, if we just lived through a radical Marxist takeover of the British state, and as Mike said, we're going to talk about the Fabian Society, the British secret society and think tank, proto-think tank. It was established in 1884. I don't think the think tank term had appeared by that point, but their express aim is to implement a global Marxist state, and they are incredibly well connected into the top levels of the new British government. But to start with, let's hear from George Bernard Shaw, who was one of the earliest members of the Fabian Society.
I object to all punishment whatsoever. I don't want to punish anybody. But there are an extraordinary number of people whom I want to kill. Not in any unkind or personal spirit, but it must be evident to all of you. You must all know half a dozen people at least who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. And I think it would be a good thing to make everybody come before a properly appointed board, just as he might come before the income tax commissioners, and say every 5 years or every 7 years, just put him there and say, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence? If you can't justify your existence, if you're not pulling your weight in the social vote, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the big organization of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us and it can't be of very much use.
It's incredible.
Yeah, isn't it just? Yeah, I mean, that's the sentiment at the heart of this movement, ultimately.
Yes, so I thought we would just have a look at a couple of other leaders of or founders of the Fabian Societies. And the place to go to have a look at the full list is the National Portrait Gallery. And they have quite a number of people there, as you can see. But I just thought we'd look at H.G. Wells. First of all, he was a founder of the Fabian Society, mostly known as a science fiction writer, of course. The method that must come in, it must in some cases be called in, is death. The merciful obliteration of weak and silly and pointless things. This is very much expressing the same point of view that we've just heard on that video clip. And he went on to say, future humans will naturally regard the modest suicide of the incurably melancholy or diseased or helpless persons as a high and courageous act of duty rather than a crime. And just a reminder, if you read The Open Conspiracy, which is, well, it's supposedly not a science fiction novel anyway, he's talking about various things like ending the nation state, controlling human population, that Russia is a crucial target for incorporation into the European system. So that's H.G. Wells. Let's look at somebody else here, Bertrand Russell. Well, he's talking about propaganda mainly and social psychology in this particular quote. But I mean, I could have chosen a host of different quotes from him. I think the subject which would be most important politically is mass psychology. Its importance has been enormously increased by the growth of modern methods of propaganda. Sorry, it may be hoped that in time anybody will be able to persuade anybody of anything if he can catch the patient young and is provided by the state with money and equipment. So, Ben, that really sort of sums up the minds that established this organization in the first place.
Absolutely, yeah. It's coercive control from top to bottom, isn't it? Well, look, we'll have a little look at some of the other pieces of the puzzle here. So important, as we'll come back to, that the mascot of the Fabian Society was the tortoise. That was widely used until the 1960s. And their motto was, when I strike hard, which is a tribute to the Roman senator Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus, who built his reputation in conflict by avoiding direct confrontation in a war with Hannibal. So he would basically attack supply lines, avoid going after the main body of troops. But then when he did strike, he would strike hard and go very quickly and very forcefully towards the target. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. If you look at the way that the Starmer government has really come out of the gates over the past 2 weeks and just been implementing this nebulous change agenda that we don't really understand. I think that that's exactly what you're looking at here. We also know that they are wolves in sheep's clothing. I mean, this is literally their sigil. This is how they present themselves. They don't telegraph their intentions. This is very much in the Saul Alinsky school of thought. You don't tell people what you're actually up to. You make them think that you're benevolent and kind, but then you move quickly to implement your agenda once you've got into position of power, and they are in a position of power. So we've just had 141 MPs from the Fabian Society elected into Parliament, right? They've been boasting about this on social media, and that includes, but not limited to, Angela Rayner, who's the Deputy Prime Minister, Rachel Reeves, who's the Chancellor, Yvette Cooper, who's the Home Secretary, Wes Streeting, who's the Secretary of Health and Social Care. Yeah, and I think if you remember the Blair segment from last week when he was talking about the need to force people to change if you love them, right? That's that. Very much that kind of mentality, right? That worldview. You have to justify your existence. We're going to force you to change. Like that's right in the heart of the health system. Lisa Nandy at DCMS, who's going to be censoring everybody, and then importantly, Ed Miliband, who I'll come back to in a minute, who's running energy security and net zero, and I think is actually, on closer inspection, a total lunatic. Right? If you really look at Ed Miliband, he's a very, very strange guy. Who else in the Labour Party? So. Gordon Brown, who's currently in the process of rewriting the British Constitution, he's a Fabian. But also, let's not forget the arch Fabian Tony Blair stood here in front of the Fabian stained glass window saying, "Pray devoutly, hammer stoutly," which actually are quite good words to stand by, I think, but not in the context of what these people are trying to do. Blair's got an extraordinarily long history with the Fabian Society. This was a speech that he gave to an event at the Old Vic Theatre in 2003, so midway through his own second term as Prime Minister. And he starts with a reference to the Clement Attlee government, which was the Labour government after the Second World War. And he basically says that today we see that great 1945 government as coming closest to building a new Jerusalem. Yet immediately afterwards, it was routinely attacked on the left for not trying hard enough to form a socialist state as a bulwark against capitalism, right? It's how they understand the state. It's like a counterpoint to the markets. Yeah, and he basically says, and once more, now, midterm in our second term, talking about his own government, the same feeling is in the air again. Have we done enough? Are we radical enough? Right? So I think what we're seeing now with Blair running Starmer, essentially, he's pulling the strings behind the scenes. We've demonstrated that, I think, quite compellingly over the past several months in terms of what Blair has been up to, what his institute has been up to. They're now driving a radical agenda, a radical neo-Marxist agenda, which ends up leading to places like this. Yeah, is this radical enough for you, Tony Blair? Right? This is the S21 torture chamber in Phnom Penh. This is the Khmer Rouge, who acted under the same ideological motivations that you're putting forward, right? What about this one? Holodomor, 3 to 6 million people perished in Ukraine because of Stalin and his communist industrial policies and ideologies, an attack on the industrial base, the food supply, and ultimately on the population itself. This is not hyperbole, right? I believe that there is the distinct potential for an attack like that to be in the pipeline for us here in the UK. Why can I say that? Because people who are very close to the current Labour government are being extraordinarily critical and aggressive towards the farmers, for example. So this is from Dale Vince, who is a big-time Labour donor and eco-millionaire, right? He's one of these people that Brian talks about, that he's a rich guy, but he wears T-shirts and jeans, and talks with a slightly sort of working class accent, and uses that as a way to disguise his methods and his intentions. And he's very much like a lot of people going after animal agriculture. They want to transform the food system. They're demanding government intervention in absolutely every area of society. There's Dale Vince himself. We can also see this in the Food, Farming and Countryside Commission, which is the organisation linked into Paul Polman, who I spoke about a month or so ago. This is about delivering the SDGs, and you can see there again, they are calling for the government to act on food. The government should have no role whatsoever to play in the food system, and yet people close to the current serving government are saying that this state needs to enter into the food supply. Absolutely madness. And it's not just food. It's also energy. Let's have a little listen to Ed Miliband.
We're on a mission. It's going to be a great adventure. There are two parts to this mission. 2030 clean power, if you like, the North Star for the department, and accelerating to net zero, because both of them are sort of absolutely crucial, and we've got a responsibility for both of them. One of the department's missions is to be bold on climate, on energy security, on jobs, on the cost of living crisis. You are my team, you are our team, and we need to be one team. I genuinely feel incredibly humbled to be working with you. Thanks so much.
Easy to lampoon Ed Miliband, but I actually think he's an extraordinarily dangerous man, and he has his hands around the energy supply and the transformation of the core infrastructure that runs the nation. And what's his background? So we know that his father swore an oath at the graveside of Karl Marx to deliver the means of production back into the hands of the working people. Right, this is the lineage that we're talking about, right at the top level of the Labour Party. And also, let's bring the tortoise back into things. I said that the tortoise was the mascot of the Fabian Society, and we've spoken a lot about tortoise media. I believe that this is a direct reference to Fabianism. I believe that they are part of this communist takeover. It's run by this guy, James Harding, who's the editor-in-chief. And as we've spoken about earlier in the year, they work at Waddesdon House, which is owned by Yad Hanadiv, which is the Rothschild Foundation. Yad Hanadiv was there at the founding of Israel, built the Supreme Court and the Knesset. And actually, as it turns out, Lord Balfour himself, of Balfour Declaration fame, was a member of the Fabian Society. This is what is sitting at the heart of this new Labour government.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for that. Now, if you like what the UK Column does, you would like to support us, the place to go is support.ukcolumn.org. A membership is €5 a month, and if you can possibly do that, it helps us out massively. I want to say a massive thank you to everybody that has supported us in this way. You could help subvert the algorithm by sharing our material, and so that we can deal with the censorship that we face on a daily basis. ukcolumn.org and UK Column Extracts, so UK are the places to go for that. And if you'd like to pick up something from the UK Column shop, that would help massively as well. Debbie, briefly, your blog is not up yet, but it will be later on today.
Blockbuster or a blockbuster. I think it's going to be very interesting. We'll see something later on in the news that'll link to it. But what is the Internet of Medical Things? Things cannot progress without it. And also an MHRA update and a few revelations that you might not be aware of.
Okay, thank you for that. And the interview that Brian did with Michael Nels is on the website now. If you didn't see that, it's there for you to watch. Please share that one as well. And Debbie, John Bedoin.
Yeah, John Bodwin, I have to tell you that this is irrefutable evidence on excess deaths and vaccine injuries. We have never seen anything like this before. This is bombshell stuff. If you haven't seen the interview, please do go watch. And there is a part 2 coming up soon.
Thank you, Debbie. And finally, a reminder of the date for your diary, which is Saturday, the 19th of October, 2024, at a venue to be announced in Bristol. And we will have more details of this next week. So please keep that in mind. So where does that take us? Debbie, you were talking about water earlier on today, but over the last number of weeks, you've been talking about desalination. So what's the latest on this?
Well, yes, water, all change. And again, sustainable, unsustainable, you choose. Do you know what is coming out of your tap? I have asked so many people that question and nobody as yet can give me an answer apart from people saying fluoride, heavy metals, lithium, question mark. So what is planned? What is in plain sight? And what is going on in our water industry? Because it is all change. And if you live near the coast, you'll be particularly interested in this. But already we know from the Financial Times that Labour are planning a new regulator. Well, Ofwat do what is what I say. They want to combine Ofwat, the EA, Environment Agency, and the Drinking Water Inspector. I don't see any inclusion of Consumer Council for Water, but hey, what do I know? So we're getting a new regulator, and we all know what we think of regulators. But everybody is interested in desalination. You might not have heard anyone else reporting about this, but as we'll come to see, it's a big agenda. Let's listen to what Elon Musk has got to say.
Look, I'm not suggesting complacency. We do want to move to a sustainable energy economy as quickly as possible, but we're not in any danger of resource collapse.
But lots of people don't have enough food or water. Water, we will run out of water. They're running out of sand.
No, Earth is 70% water by surface area.
But you can't drink that.
But desalination is absurdly cheap.
Why don't we do it then?
We do it. It is done.
You have a lot of free time.
It is done.
Cheap, is it, Elon? Well, we'll come to see. And I would just like to say that Cornwall, where I live, is not water poor. We have so much water, we don't know what to do with it. But what is desalination? So here's a little diagram to show you what desalination is. Basically, it's removing the salt from seawater to turn it into drinking water. Or is it? Because it's a big industry. As we'll come to see, Grandview Research have valued the global water desalination equipment market at a staggering $15.5 billion, and that was in 2022. But who else is involved in this agenda? Well, this is really the tip of the iceberg. So let's go through them really quickly. So we've got the WEF desalination. We've got the World Bank desalination. We've got the United States Geological Survey desalination. We've got the World Health Organization desalination. We've even got Chatham House desalination. So this is a massively big business. Now, I found an article from Waterless called Good, Troublesome and the Future. And it seems to be that what they're saying as you go deeper into the article is that the pros, they're looking at Israel as having the most advanced technology, and they have 20% more water than it needs. And you might remember Vanessa's comments on Wednesday with regards to where Israel get their water. I'll leave Vanessa to comment more on that. But the cons are that it's very energy consuming. You need electricity, petroleum or natural gas to power them. They're costly to operate and construct. You need miles of power lines for remote areas, and effluent brine is harmful for waterways. But they want solar and wind and geothermal, of course, to power them. There's also even an international desalination and reuse association, and they're called the IDRA. They were founded in 1973. They're recognized by the United Nations, and they've got a conference coming up, or a congress coming up in Abu Dhabi in December. So again, this is a massive agenda. But what's happening in the UK? What do the UK say about desalination? Well, the government are very keen in desalination, and they say that between 2025 and 2050, we're going to need 3.4 billion more additional litres a day. So they're going to be developing new reservoirs and desalination. But then I went to look at the Financial Times, who have just brought out an article on the wave of innovation which aims to make desalination sustainable. Now, they say that already South West Water, which is my water company, have a desalination plant in the Isles of Scilly. Thames Water also have one, but because of the energy needed to generate, they don't use it anymore. It's not operating. So then let's look at the national framework from the Environment Agency, because they've got a lot to do with water preservation and drought. And they say that the southeast are pretty much desperate for water. And because the West Country has plenty of water, why don't we just move it from the southwest to the southeast? I'll let you read that document in full, but you'll see there that it involves moving, as does the next slide, where you can see a map of England, and you can see the bottom box is the West Country, and we have only moderate pressure on our water resources. So therefore, it makes sense to potentially transfer to other areas, which is very expensive. But I believe there are other reasons as well, darker reasons, and I'm going to explore those now, because South West Water say that their reservoirs are nearly full. So this is really good news. However, we have been appointed a drought director, and the drought director's name is David Harris, and he's very pleased that February was the wettest on record. The BBC are reporting that Cornwall will provide desalination, will provide a third of the county's water, But there is a lot of resistance. And I joined the protest group one day on the beach. And the protest group, we were waiting for Fergal Sharkey, but shame on him. He didn't turn up. We all got blown to bits, but he didn't turn up. But they're very concerned, obviously, with the desalination effects in our area and sewage. So what does South West Water say? Why do we need desalination? Well, apparently, most of our water comes from rivers and reservoirs. And our reservoirs have plenty of water, but then they say they're empty. But where's the water going? Tourism, climate change is what they're saying. Well, I've got other ideas as to where the water might go. So in my area, we have been told that we are going to be the first desalination plant. That's really appropriate because obviously it pricked my interest and I wanted to know what effect this would have on the local community. And I got an invite. I got an invite to the public consultation. And here's a copy of the letter. And it told me that I was going to see specialist project team to bring my questions. And this is David Harris. He's an Australian and he is the drought resilience director. So I was really looking forward to seeing him. Now, what I am going to say very quickly, and I'm going to read off my little list here, because when I went to the meeting, I had to register to go to the meeting. I wanted to see David Harris, but apparently David Harris was on annual leave because he's been very busy managing the cryptosporidium incident and he's very tired. So sadly, he couldn't be at the consultation. There wasn't really anybody in charge at the consultation. We are the second wettest county in England, so I struggle to see why we're in drought, and I think it's probably all a bit of a lie. And I went to the meeting, but nobody from South West Water had their name badges on. And when I asked them their names, they refused to give me their name or their position. And the questions that I wanted to ask, I was told I couldn't. Now, just a few quotes from the meeting. When I asked a name, I was told no, I wasn't going to be given a name because he got unpleasant emails sent to his email address afterwards. He wasn't happy to give me his surname because of traffic. And when I asked him about British Lithium, which I'll come on to in a minute, he says he has nothing to do, South West Water have nothing to do with British Lithium, not part of the remit, no knowledge about it, can't answer any questions. When I asked if we were in a drought, I was told not today. And when I spoke to the press officer and asked him for an interview for UK Column, I was told that I wasn't allowed to film and that if the BBC had been there, it would be different. So I wanted to know the connection between Imeries and South West Water, because Imeries have land where the desalination plant is going to be placed. And here we can see Imeries are very hot on water treatment. But who are Imeries? Let's look back in history at who are Imeries, because believe it or not, Imeries started in 1880 by the Rothschilds, would you believe? Isn't it funny how that name keeps popping up? They combined a metals and mining company, and I don't know how to pronounce this, I do apologise, Penaroa, I think it's called, and it's of course now become Imeries. So I'm living in Par, and I went down to Imeries, to Par Docks, and I did a very short little video just to show you the close proximity of Imeries and South West Water and where they want to build the desalination plant. Let's have a quick look. And this is again Debbie Evans from UK Column, and I'm at Imeries. Imeries Docks. Big. Just ripe for a desalination plant, eh? EcoBob's boss. Creating sustainable communities. And as we can see, if I swerve round, you can see that there is South West Water's pumping station right there, right next door to Imeries. How convenient. Oh, and the sewage treatment work, that's just underneath that bridge. I'm with you with the sewage treatment works, and there is an electricity substation right next to South West Water's pumping station. So it's in very close proximity. So then I was very interested to find that Imeries have partnered up with no other than British Lithium. Have a look at this little bit of video.
I really see only advantages in this partnership. We will need the support of the people, the authorities, local and regional.
Imeries is very important to the lithium industry of the UK. They have an unrivaled land position here. This is a massive undertaking that involves a wide range of risks of different types, but we believe between us we know how to overcome those risks and make this project a reality. But the great thing about lithium is the world understands the need for it and that it's a solution for pressing climate emergency. Governments around the world are united in bringing about electrification, renewable power, electric vehicles to reduce emissions. And we're lucky to have joined us today a number of senior civil servants from the UK government to hear the policies that they've put in place. They have brought about a critical mineral strategy and other funding initiatives to thank Her Majesty's government through these organs for the support they gave. When we found this deposit, there was no known means of extracting the lithium in an environmentally sustainable way. We had to develop such a thing.
And so that was just a little bit. And if you want to go and have a little look at more and British Lithium CEO speaking, then please do. It's on YouTube. So lithium needs a lot of water. Here's just a screenshot just to tie up that little bit there of this huge partnership between British Lithium. But I've also been looking at academic papers because lithium needs a lot of water, And here we go, lithium recovery from brine, seawater desalination concentrate. So who is this desalination plant for? And where is our water going to? Are South West Water, Imerys, British Lithium, and someone else, which we'll come to in a minute, Veolia, are they all stealing our water? Because South West Water have announced that they're joining forces with Veolia. And Veolia are a huge French company. And let's see what Veolia are into. And interesting to see that Veolia also support the lithium industry. So this is all tying up very nicely, isn't it? Because we have plenty of water down here, but they don't seem to think that we do. And what I want to know is how much water is going from our resources to British Lithium, and also the contamination. You know, what kind of leakage are we going to get? Because lithium is actually very dangerous, and it is, they're talking about adding it to water to prevent suicide. And many people may know that if you have bipolar, manic depression, many people are medicated by lithium, and it's very dangerous. So a drought, we're in a drought. And ironically, 1 hour after being pretty much kicked out of the meeting, I flooded, and those are my feet just to show you the depth of the water. That's my road, and I've got a very short video just to illustrate what we go through, and I'll talk you through it. So this is a flood of my road. This took 3 minutes of heavy rain, monsoon rain. The reason I'm standing in the middle of the road is I am trying to stop the traffic from going through, because every time the traffic goes through, they create a huge bow wave. That's my hand. You'll see me waving. No, don't please come through. Because every time a car comes through, it creates a massive bow wave that floods our homes even more than they're already flooded. There are also open manholes underneath that water that is dangerous for cars. This is sewage water. I'm trying to protect our homes. I'd like to say to all the motorists that abused me, shouted at me, threatened me, stuck their fingers at me, and tried to run me over, I'm trying to protect you, but I'm also trying to protect our homes. So are we in a drought? Is desalination a scam? Is it for real? You decide, but there'll be plenty more on desalination in the future.
Debbie, thank you very much for that. Now, the other news that was sort of breaking as we were preparing for the news this morning was this massive IT outage globally. So who's been responsible for that? Well, it's this organization, CrowdStrike, who are apparently one of these cybersecurity firms, similar to the ones we were talking about the other day that are so much sponsored by Unit 8200 from Israel. Now, this one not sponsored by 8200 from Israel, but they are founded by a former FBI agent. So the connection back to the intelligence agencies again. So CrowdStrike, a cybersecurity firm that are providing services to many third-party companies. And apparently what they've done is they've rolled out an update, and that update has broken Windows machines just about everywhere. Well, including in the health service. I know Debi we can talk about this later in extra, but the majority of GP practices affected by this. So I slightly edited the question slide from the Unit 8200 presentation just to ask a single question this time. What is the true nature of the symbiotic relationship between cyber warfare and cyber defense? Because, as I say, although this company is not Israeli backed, it is related to the FBI. And my question really is here, was this a rehearsal for a future internet shutdown? And of course, I've got no evidence for that at all. But the internet and all the services which sit on it are being increasingly centralized. The off switch is apparently easy to press. My question is, would it not be more sensible, if we want to have resilience, to decentralize and move back to a decentralized architecture? People may have an opinion on this, but just to understand what's happened here, what we're talking about is something has been placed in the critical path for critical infrastructure, and then was set to automatically update. And when they rolled out an automatic update across the world, that has shut down Windows computers right across the world. It's affected Microsoft's Azure cloud platform, and of course many companies using the Azure cloud platform to run their systems. But the other thing to note about CrowdStrike is that they have been the people behind many of the accusations against Russia and China with respect to cyber attacks and so on. But unfortunately, going back a number of years now, they were discovered to have misread the data, shall we say, with respect to this particular Russian hacking charge that they were making at the time. So not the best reputation. And now we have the situation where they are effectively causing the shutdown of systems, which are resulting in air travel being cancelled, GP surgeries not able to function, and a whole host of other banks and a whole host of other infrastructure not able to function. I think we need to be questioning the types of people that are running our critical infrastructure and the architecture of that infrastructure. Okay, let's move on and back to you, Ben. Sorry, I'm sort of find the right button there.
Sure thing. So we're going to have a little look at what's going on in the NHS and some interesting individuals who've come across my path over the past couple of weeks that I wanted to just flag up. So the first one is this fella, Professor Mark Britnell. And he is quite a serious person when it comes to UK healthcare. He spent 20 years in the NHS from the start of his career, rising to Director General of the Department of Health, and was also a member of the NHS Management Board up until 2007, 2009. So that was been under both Tory and Labour governments that he was working. He then spent 13 years and 3 months at, hang on a minute, where are we? There it is. Fantastic. 13 years and 3 months at KPMG, where he worked in 81 countries on 440 separate projects, with teams delivering strategy, policy, operations for public, private sector healthcare. And he actually grew that to the point where healthcare became 22% of total global revenues, with 55,000 staff working across 145 countries for KPMG. Yeah, really, really serious global healthcare guy. He's also now a member of the Board of Trustees at the King's Fund, which is one of the primary advisors and think tanks inside the NHS or linked to the NHS. And he is also the professor at the Global Business School for Health at UCL. Oh, makes me shudder when I hear those words together, business and health in the current context. Really bad news. Now, I came across this guy because someone shared or someone commented on that I'm connected to this post. It's one of the things I love about LinkedIn is these sort of interconnections that you can find. And he put this post up saying that it was great to catch up with his good friend of 30 years, Sir Julian Hartley. He had the pleasure of establishing NHS providers 20 years ago, which was originally called the NHS Foundation Trust Network, of which Julian is now the CEO. We talked about a wide variety of issues, including the productivity puzzle in healthcare, now accounting for 43% of all government spend, up from 26% in 1999. Health must help power economic growth, which in turn will produce more tax receipts for further investment, a virtuous circle indeed. This is the argument that we're hearing. We heard it from Wes Streeting last week at the Blair Foundation, and we're starting to see this crop up absolutely everywhere else. They're going to start asking for more and more money to be put into the health service on the basis that they've created some models that tell us that if you put in £1, you get £10 back, right? Doesn't work like that at all. The ideal budget for the health system would be zero, yeah? Not putting more and more money in, particularly not given what we've seen them do over the past 4 years. And we already know that they have 195 billion. This is him crowing about the scale of this market. If we can get this back on the screen quickly, I'm just going to look at that final paragraph. Yeah, so harnessing the 195 billion spend across the NHS, unprecedented amount of money. You're talking about about 350, 400 pounds per month per taxpayer, right? This is the kind of budget that we're talking about. 1.5 million people employed, and it's going to be mission critical for economic growth across the UK. And these two people, with their long and storied and illustrious careers in public and private healthcare, are getting together to talk about the future of the NHS. And I would love to have been a fly on the wall in that conversation. So too would Rich Corbridge, Director General at the Department of Work and Pensions, responsible for digitisation of the DWP, probably working with Tony Blair. We talked about the DWP and Blair programme last week, who I have actually met a couple of times, and he seems to have unfriended me on LinkedIn. I can't imagine why that might be. Anyway, Julian Hartley, so we talked about the professor at UCL, the former KPMG guy. Let's have a little quick look at Julian Hartley, because to me, we talk about public-private partnership. This is where it really happens, yeah? You're talking about two individuals, one in the NHS, one in the private sector, long-time friends, long-time collaborators, talking about how they're going to stitch up the future of a £200 billion captive marketplace, which is our health service, right? This is how they talk about it. So what's Julian Hartley up to? So he is the chief executive, or actually I should say Sir Julian Hartley as well, by the way, right? This is a guy at the top level of the establishment. He's the chief executive of NHS Providers. It describes itself as a membership organisation for the NHS hospital, mental health community and ambulance services. I mentioned this organisation to someone, a contact of mine, Superintelligence, and he basically said that it was part of the dismantling from the inside process. When the NHS Foundation Trust Network was introduced back in 2004, that was part of the dismantling of the NHS from the inside. It was part of the public-private initiative agenda, turning individual hospitals into small businesses so that they could raise capital, sell off assets, do all those things that states should not be doing with public assets, right? And these two gentlemen sit right in the heart of it, and apparently they're in London to celebrate the King's speech and the agenda for the future of the health system. He's also this guy Brewer, neo-Marxist. There's this video of him talking about white allyship, on which, you know, no one in the health system should be talking about this stuff. Talk about healthcare, talk about patients. Just leave this neo-Marxist doctrine behind, please, for the sake of absolutely everybody. We know that these public-private marketplaces don't work. They deliver absolutely no value at all, apart from to the people who are scamming them. The Blair PPI scheme, the one that they're referencing, we know now in hindsight, cost £300 billion or thereabouts for infrastructure projects with a value of about 55 billion. Yeah, so we paid 6 times over the odds because of public-private partnerships, and that's what they've placed right at the heart of the future plans for the health system. All of this is a continuation of the Build Back Better life sciences vision that was set out by Boris Johnson. It's exactly the same agenda. Nothing about it has changed at all. And what's that going to deliver for? It's going to deliver for big pharmaceutical companies. I've shown this photo a few times, yeah, and I've spoken about Starmer and Georgia Gould in the context, but the fellow on the right there is Tom Keith Roach. He runs AstraZeneca in the UK, and he's been very excited over the past couple of weeks because he can see that Wes Streeting and the Department for Health are on a mission to bring closer unity between the way life sciences and the NHS collaborate. Their ambition at AstraZeneca is to bring 20 medicines to market by 2030 in this country. Right, their COVID vaccine was removed from the market because it killed nearly 1,000 people, and yet they're hanging around with Keir Starmer and talking about putting 20 more novel medicines into the market by 2030. And actually, when they talk about economic performance in the health service, this is a lot of what it's about. It's shareholder returns for UK PLC, aka the big pharmaceutical companies, and they do that by introducing ridiculous, as we've seen with COVID pandemics, but also I just received this job specification from the Wellcome Trust talking about becoming a strategic engagement advisor at the International Pandemic Preparedness Secretariat, very highfalutin name. And basically what that's about, it's about the 100 days mission, which has been agreed by the G7, which says that in the first days of a pandemic threat being realized, the following interventions should be in place: accurate and approved rapid point of care diagnostic kits. Yeah, so big market in testing, an initial regimen of therapeutics. So big market in therapeutics, and vaccines ready to be produced at scale for global deployment within 100 days in the context of this public-private marketplace that the Labour Party is perfectly happy to stand behind. And Wellcome, as we know, run until very recently, I think it was last year, by this fellow, Jeremy Farrar, author of Spike, that's his book about the pandemic. You can see what he thinks about it. And actually, I think Mike, you were saying earlier, he left SAGE because it wasn't aggressive enough in pushing the lockdowns. And Farrar is now at the World Health Organization trying to drum up the next pandemic. Let's have a little listen.
The current outbreak, for want of a better word, in America amongst cows is really concerning as well, and also talks to this issue of transmission. We have to understand in those cow settings, sheds, how H5N1 is transmitting, because it may be evolving into transmitting in different ways. Do the milking structures of cows create aerosols? Is it the environment which they're living in? Is it the transport system that is spreading this around the country? So this is a huge concern, and I think we have to watch, more than watch, we have to make sure that if H5N1 did come across to humans with human transmission, that we were in a position to immediately respond with access equitably to vaccines, therapeutics and diagnostics.
The health system is in big trouble.
Yes, undoubtedly. We'll talk a bit more about that and extra as well. And Debbie, just to finish off, you have a little bit of video for us.
I do. And this was 7 years ago. This is Klaus Schwab. He's talking to Sergey Brin, who was the co-creator of Google. And just want to remind people of what he said would happen in 10 years, bearing in mind that this was 7 years ago. And for everybody, read my blog. It's very relevant. Have a look at this video.
So big data, digital tools at the service of medical and biological progress and advancing very fast. But can you imagine that in 10 years when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants, and we measure your brain waves, and I can immediately tell you how the people react, or I can feel.
Yes, well, that's very prescient perhaps, but we'll talk about that in extra as well. So Debbie, thank you very much for that. Thank you to everybody that's joined us today. Thanks to Ben and Debbie for contributions. We will see in a few minutes if you're UK column member for extra. Otherwise, I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you Monday at 1 p.m. as usual. Bye-bye.